Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Moosie Drier and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Moosie Drier. He became the president of Universal Pictures at the age of 26, where he developed and oversaw over 200 films, including Smokey and the Bandit, Animal House, Blues Brothers, E.T., and Back to the Future. He was behind such films as Natural Born Killers, Can't Buy Me Love, Bull Durham. He served 2 terms as the president of the Producers Guild of America, and he's the author of the new book, Rafferty Returns. Please help us welcome Thom Mount. Thom, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me, and that's a embarrassing lead up, but thank you very much, sort of, and I'll deny any of it if we get to a court hearing.
Sounds great. Welcome.
Your career is unbelievable, so we have a lot to cover, but I want to start by going back with you. You were born in North Carolina. Was your family very into movies, and what were some of your favorites as a kid?
So my family had nothing to do with movies whatsoever, and I grew up in a little town called Durham, North Carolina, which in those days was about 250,000 people, all of whom worked in tobacco factories.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so it had Liggett and Myers and American Tobacco and all of these large companies, and that's all the city did. If you parked your car on a hot summer's day and you came back, you could write your name in the tobacco dust on the side of the fender. You know, it was...
Is that what your family did? Your family worked in the tobacco industry as well?
Not at all. My dad was a lawyer and very, very politically oriented, big-time Democrat in an era when Democrats still ruled the South. That's long gone, of course. But yeah, and he had a best friend and fellow lawyer named Terry Sanford, who became governor of North Carolina and then senator and then president of Duke University. So we were very much all about campaigns and about turning out the vote and how to manage all of that.
Oh,
yeah. All right. So let's go back to one of your first jobs. You worked with the legendary cult filmmaker Roger Corman.
Yes.
How did that come about? What was Corman like?
Corman was wonderful. I loved Roger, and as a favor to Roger, I much later in life, with the Mount Company, I developed a film Roger wanted to direct, and gave him $1 million fee to direct a picture. He was so fucking thrilled; it was crazy, and we shot this a version of Frankenstein in a place called Alta Bergamo up in the Italian hill country near Lake Como. So, in event, here's the deal. Roger hired me, paid me about $60 a week. I was still going to graduate school, but I managed to finagle to gerrymander the classes I was teaching to pay for grad. I couldn't afford to go to graduate school, so I had to teach a class 3 days a week, but I taught the class 3 days a week, and I still worked for Roger 5 days a week, and we managed to make all that work. Working for Roger was like this. You're sent to an alley of a area where he wants to shoot something. He may or may not have a permit to shoot there. It's irrelevant. We got a little tiny crew, maybe 12 or 15 people. A police car comes screaming around the corner, runs into some trash cans. They fly all over the place. We get that cut. Then there's a guy on the 3rd story of a fire escape, and in the alley we're in, and someone shoots at him. We see a gun. We hear a report, boom. The guy falls off the balcony into an air mat, and then the Playboy Playmate of the Month takes her top off. Cut. That's the movie. Done. Whole thing. 10 days. Never more than 10 days to shoot a film. And it was an unbelievable opening. You know, I learned a lot about what to do and a lot about what not to do. So it was, and I really loved Roger. He was smart and funny and very wry.
Yeah, you know, your $1 million fee far exceeded the entire budget for so many of his early films.
Of
Just
course.
his fee alone, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, Thom, this blows my mind, and I'm sure you've gotten this a lot. So, we're gonna get to like the path that quick lane that you took at Universal Pictures. I think 3 years you were running Universal Pictures, but you were 26 when you were the head of it. I was trying to learn how to work my microwave oven at 26, and then that's just unbelievable. So how did you get into Universal Pictures in the first place?
Well, I'll call you for some hints about the microwave.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So I went to work for Universal in this way. I made a really bad film at CalArts. I was going to graduate school there while all this was happening, and it was terrible. Little black and white 10-minute film, and it was in a festival of film students' work shown at the New Art Theater in West Los Angeles. In that audience was a woman who was a secretary at Universal. She liked the film. I never told her I thought it was a dog. She liked it. That's great. Anybody who liked anything that I was doing, I was amazed. And she got my number from the guy who ran the theater and called me. And she said, I have a boss who's impossible. In the last 3 years, we've gone through 9 assistants. Nobody survives this guy. But I liked your film. And if you'd like to try for this job, I'll set up an interview with him. Come over and meet him. Okay. So I did. I showed up in blue jeans and cowboy boots and a corduroy jacket with my hair down below my shoulders. Probably wasn't the look they were going for at Universal. I noticed everyone I met was wearing a black or dark blue suit and a tie. So we had a really good meeting. I thought the guy was great. He was funny. He was smart. He was really had an arch view of society and the world and movies' place in it. He had been an agent working for Mr. Wasserman when Mr. Wasserman had moved Music Corporation of America to LA in 47 and become the biggest agency in Hollywood by far, the most powerful. Then they bought the studio. They were forced to buy the studio by Bobby Kennedy, who filed a Justice Department claim against Universal and said, you can't do both. You can't represent talent and produce talent. You have to make a decision. You're either an agency or a production operation. So Wasserman said, fine, I will be a studio. He completed the purchase of Universal, and that was that. So I have this meeting with Ned Tannen, wonderful guy, who I worked with very closely for years. Great, but really difficult. He was, in fact, bipolar. I didn't know the phrase. I'd never heard of it. Later, I came to understand that Ned was truly bipolar. On Monday, everything was perfect. Go ahead, make the picture, say yes to that, buy this, do that, do whatever you want, make it all work. On Tuesday, it was fire everybody. We're going under. We can't afford this. Get rid of take half the people out of the production department. Get rid of all of them. We don't need all the, what is this stuff? Who are these people? Why are we making that movie? And back and forth like that. So I learned to screen out the bad stuff and ignore it. If I waited 24 hours, it would mostly be gone. And so I would respond to the good Ned and not the bad Ned. And I'd been there about 3 months. I was walking across the 15th floor, an acre and a half of white carpet. And I saw Mr. Wasserman, the chairman of the company, who was, by the way, the most powerful figure in Hollywood and by far the most feared, coming at me. I'd never met the guy. He said, young man, do you work for me? I thought, Christ. Yes, I do. What's your name? I told him my name. He said, be in my office at 3:00, and he walked off. Fuck. So I went running to Ned and said, okay, I'm going to get fired at 3:00 because Wasserman stopped me. I don't even know the guy. And he told me to be in his office 3:00. And Ned looked at me for a long beat. And he said, Thom, you're not important enough to fire.
Wow.
And that was, in truth, the most effective lesson I could have learned about Hollywood. Never take yourself seriously because you might be gone tomorrow. Everybody's on a 30-second option. So just do what you can. So I go to see Wasserman at 3:00, and I'm going to make this story short. So don't worry, we're not going to eat up your entire time here. But you
okay.
ask how I started and how it worked, and I'll tell you, and this story will tell you. I sat down in his office, which was lined with English hunting prints and 1800s English furniture, like the entire universe of Universal. Anglophiles, devoted Anglophiles. So Mr. Wasserman said, we're going to make a black motion picture. I said, well, yes, but you understand that I'm not black. And he said, no, I understand that. But there are no people who we know who are black who could do this. So you're in charge. You're going to make a black motion picture, and we're going to win the NAACP Image Award. And we're going to do it in the next 6 months because the awards are coming up. We're not going to try to gerrymander that in any way, but make a good film and get it out there, and don't spend more than $1 million. And if you screw this up, you're fired. And I said, okay, thank you very much. And he said, great. He said, by the way, we have a friend in common. I thought, what the hell is he talking about? Friend in common? Oi. So I said, who would that be? He said, well, Senator Kennedy says you're okay. So I thought, okay, here's how that happened. I had been doing a lot of left-wing organizing work in college, and I'd gone to Bard College, upstate New York, and I'd been very much involved in anti-war movement and other kinds of things. And we created a group called Students for Kennedy around Bobby Kennedy's candidacy as a potential president. And so I was organizing on college campuses, and I met Bobby twice on the campaign trail, organizing votes, getting people to knock on doors and do all the stuff you have to do. No big deal. Then Bobby gets assassinated. Then 2 weeks after the assassination, no, it was not 2 weeks, maybe a month after the assassination, a woman calls me, a woman named Teresa calls me from Senator Kennedy's office, Ted Kennedy, who I didn't know, and said, listen, we know you were helping Bobby with the campaign, and we have someone coming into LAX. Would you pick her up and give her a ride to the Beverly Hills Hotel as a favor to the family? Sure, of course. What are you going to do? You know, and so I go my old Volvo to thing. I pick up a nice looking young lady. I give her a ride to the Beverly Hills Hotel. And then a month later, there's some other favor. It's small. It's like pick up a package or go meet this thing or deliver this to this guy or just nothing. He knew I'd written him a letter, and I sent her to Kennedy, telling him how happy I was to be trying to do things for the Kennedys, and that I was trying to find a job in the movie business. And then when I got the job at Universal, I wrote him a letter and said, please don't worry about the movie thing because I got a job at Universal and I'm fine. He wrote Mr. Wasserman, who he knew well. And he said, in this letter, parenthetically, by the way, you hired this guy named Mount. He's worked with the family. We think he's a good guy. That was it. That was the entire reference. But that was my recommendation to stay at Universal forever if I wanted to. And so I went to work, and we made a film called The Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars and Motor Kings, which neither of you have ever heard of.
I've seen that movie. I love that movie, actually.
Tom, I have never heard of it, but this Jonathan Rosen, who is in front of you right now, is an encyclopedia.
Good.
It's a baseball movie, Richard Pryor. Yes.
That's right. James Earl Jones and Billy D. Williams. That's exactly right. And it cost us $900,000 to make, and John Badham directed it, and we won the NAACP Image Award because it was about the Negro National Leagues, which had not been recorded, and it was a middle-class comedy for Black people who were used to having to put up with across 125th Street and the Mac and a whole bunch of films that suggested that life being Black in America was only about drugs and getting shot. So
Wow.
it made a little
Unbelievable.
money. It made little money. It did the thing. I had no idea I don't know what I was doing. We went to Macon, Georgia. The mayor was some right-wing lunatic and who conspired with the local Hilton Hotel to throw us all out. We had to rent a dormitory from the local college to be able to have a place for everybody to stay. It was a mess, but we got through it. And the film actually went into profits, not huge, but as Mr. Wasserman said to me, do that again, make it bigger.
Mm-hmm.
That was the instruction, do that again. So I did. And the next film was a film called Car Wash.
Oh, yeah.
And
Wow.
Car Wash, we shot on the corner of Rampart and 6th. We rented a car wash. Guy was so happy to rent his car wash for a month because clearly he was dying in the car wash business.
Yeah.
But
Did you have a producer named Art Linson on that film? Do you remember?
we did, yes.
I remember him doing Car Wash. It was a big. I mean, that's your second.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Car Wash worked, and Norman Whitfield, God bless him, created an unbelievably good soundtrack for Car Wash.
Yeah.
And I brought Art in. Art was not the guy who was producing the movie in the beginning. The guy was Gary Stromberg, and who was a friend of Art's. But Gary created the idea of doing a play in Washington, D.C. in the arena stage about a day in the life of a car wash.
Huh.
And I couldn't do that. It wasn't my venue. But I said, look, if you want to develop this as a movie, let's do it. So we did. And then he called me one day and said, I forgot to tell you something. So that's the call you never want as a studio executive, the I forgot to tell you something call.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, well, this guy, Art Linson, and I kind of promised him he could be a producer on this. And I said, well, how serious a promise was this? And he said, well, I haven't paid him back. And I thought, well, okay. We'll take Art Linson as a producer on this thing and just don't let him get in the way. And Gary didn't let him get in the way, and we made Car Wash, and it all worked out.
I saw the thing that Time Magazine referred to you as the baby mogul, which you hated. I read.
I was very, very lucky. I made films that made money. And first of all, I was working for Mr. Wasserman, and while I was reporting to Ned Tannen, I was only reporting to him every other day because half of those days he was not someone you wanted to report to. And then the other half of the time he was fine. So I was taking the good Ned and ignoring the bad Ned. And then I had to put a team together. So I hired a bunch of people my age. Everybody was in their 20s. The entire executive ranks of Universal as a filmmaking institution converted from people who are in their 70s to people who are in their 20s in the course of 2 years. And I went to publishing companies in New York and hired the smartest men or women I could find. I went all over. I hired some kids from Cal Arts who were friends of mine, Sean Daniel, Bruce Berman, others. And, we took it seriously, but we also did it with a great sense of humor. After a few years of working at an insane pace, I had T-shirts made for everybody that just said, we'll sleep when we're dead, and that was the spirit of the place.
Mm-hmm.
So how I moved up was really simple. I made some films that made money. And at that moment in cultural history, pictures that were alternative so-called youth films were suddenly popular. I mean, American Graffiti was the biggest grossing picture Universal had ever made at the time it was released.
Yeah.
Did you get a lot of resentment from the people who were there longer, than you, like the older people?
Fuck yes. Was I
Yeah.
persona non grata completely? And I had old guys, 70-year-old guys with parking their Rolls Royces in the basement of the tower. And, they'd show up at 9 o'clock in the morning and they'd leave at 4, and they had to play golf on Fridays. And they had a different world. They lived in a different world, and they all belonged to country clubs, and they all had $6,000 suits. And what the fuck, man? I don't know anything about any of that. And so, nor did I care about it. What I was interested in was, can we make movies that will touch people?
Mm-hmm.
So I had a sign on my desk that said, make me laugh, make me cry, make me think, make me come, or leave me alone.
Ah, hilarious.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. So we do want to talk. The films that came out under your tenure at Universal are just incredible, and some of the greatest and most beloved films ever made. So we want to go through some of them, and if you give us some behind the scenes about about them. So I want to start with Smokey and the Bandit with Burt Reynolds, because Burt was one of the biggest stars on the planet at the time. So can you tell us a little about that one?
Sure, of course. So there was a wonderful producer named Mort Engelberg, sadly deceased now recently, but Mort was a great guy, and he had been started as a PR person at United Artists. He then started producing independently. He came to me with a guy named Hal Needham. He said, this guy, Hal Needham, who was a stuntman, is going to direct a picture. Okay, so it's fine, let's find out what this means. And what it meant was they had this notion, they had a treatment that they developed for Columbia Pictures called CB to Atlanta. It was fucking awful. Oh, guys, man, oy vey. It was just like, how did I get in this mess and how do I get out kind of thing. However, the idea of the movie was terrific. I mean, I'd grown up in the South. I grew up going to drive-ins where there were, it's Roger Corman territory.
Mm-hmm.
And Smokey and the Bandit had all of those earmarks. It was funny. It was outrageous. It had lots of car stunts. We had a chance to throw cars over things and off things and turn them upside down and jump rivers and jump on the back of moving vehicles. And so I thought, we're not making anything like this. We're making all these other movies, and many of them are, quote, smart movies, which is dangerous territory,
Mm-hmm.
And so I talked to Hal Needham. I thought he was wonderful. He was wonderful. He was a guy who never graduated from high school. He didn't go to high school. He never graduated from grammar school. He's raised on a farm in Missouri, became a stuntman by accident at Warner Brothers. And that added to the fact that he and Burt Reynolds were best friends, and he lived in Burt's guest house, suggested that there was some kind of relationship here that might work, and we might get Burt to do the movie. So Burt had an agent named Sue Mengers, who was a fearsome beast and a wonderful person. She was really tough and really terrific, Sue. So I went to see her, and she said, you don't have any money, do you have to make the picture? And I said, well, I don't know, $3 or $4 million, maybe something like that. And she said, well, Burt needs $1 million, but for $1 million, he's only going to do 13 days. So I thought, all right, well, we can figure that out. I said, 13 days. And he said, oh, and the other requirement, Hal Needham has to direct. If Hal Needham's not directing, he's not doing the picture. Okay, fine. So some little thresholds to leap over here, but they're not impossible, those requirements. So we made that deal. Burt made the picture. Hal directed it. I was on the set, not all the time, but a lot, in Atlanta. We shot it in Atlanta. We had an enormous amount of support from the then governor, a guy named Jimmy Carter, who was just loved the idea that we were shooting a movie in Atlanta. And he gave us his head of security, a highway patrolman, a Georgia highway patrolman named Ronnie Gay, who's wonderful and insane and would do anything. And so we'd say, we need to shut this interstate down for 3 miles here while we do this stunt. It'll take us about 6 hours. And he'd say, no problem. And suddenly there'd be police cars everywhere, and we'd shut down the fucking interstate. And the guy from the federal transportation operation would show up in a car and say, you can't shut the interstate down. This is a federal highway. And it's, and Ronnie Gay would say, just let me talk to him a little bit and take him. Come over here, buddy, old pal. And they'd go off in the corner and talk for a while. And then we'd never hear another problem about it. It was just, so Needham did a great job.
Yeah.
We shot the film very quickly. We never used Burt more than 13 days. I had doubles for Burt all over the place. If you watch the movie closely, you'll see that there's a lot of over the shoulder shooting. So you don't see his face, you see the hat and the back and the shoulder. And that way we got, 28 days worth of shooting out of Burt's 13-day contract. And then when I saw the director's cut, I was really depressed because it wasn't strong enough to be a releasable picture. We had an editor working on the lot named Verna Fields, who was a wizard, fabulous person. And I had already used Verna to help with thinking about how to correct some other pictures. She had rescued American Graffiti. She created the entire Suzanne Summers in the white T-bird motif that unifies that picture. That was all second unit shoot after the fact that Verna put together with George. And so she and George were friends. She was respected by everybody. And I turned Smokey and the Bandit over to her. And if you watch Smokey and the Bandit closely, you will see that in a lot of the big truck sequences when they're going through forests, if you slow the picture down a little bit, a lot of those forests have a whole lot of palm trees in them. That's because we shot all that in Ojai as opposed to Georgia. We couldn't afford to go back to Georgia to reshoot anything. Anyway, Smokey that year was the second most successful picture in Hollywood. Smokey did domestically a little over $300 million. The picture that beat us was called Star Wars.
Wow. I mean, it's the fact that Reynolds only shot 13 days. His character's in the title, and he's only on a 13-day shoot. That's a magic trick. Let me ask you about Animal House. There's a lot of words written about the shenanigans or whatever about that film, and maybe some of the SNL cast were slotted to be in the film, and they ended up not. Well, tell us about Animal House.
Well, so Animal House was Ned Tannen, the fellow I was working for at least some of the time in those early years, had some material that he had optioned and told me to go through it and see if any of it would make a movie. So treatments, basically, 10 pages, 15 pages, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I found something called Night of the Seven Fires or something to that effect by Chris Miller. And I thought, who the hell is Chris Miller? And why is this funny, even though we can't possibly make a movie out of this? And then I realized Chris Miller's working for the National Lampoon. So here's a guy who knows something about humor, and there's some good stuff in here, some scenes, but it's not a movie. And then I went to New York and I met Chris Miller. I met his boss, by the way, Matty Simmons, who owned the Lampoon. And then I met his homies, his buddies, and Doug Kinney, and the little tiny group they had lived to take the piss out of their boss, Matty Simmons. That was their first rule every day: do something that Matty will hate and make him crazy. So that's what they were doing. And then the next piece was, let's see if we can write a script. So we started that process. I had loved the National Lampoon's High School Yearbook edition, which had already come out. I'd seen it. I tried to option it, by the way. I'd gone to Matty Simmons and he refused to option it. And he said, no, we're going to make our own movies and we're not going to do anyway. So after about a year of development work, we had a script that they'd put together called Animal House, which was pretty much the movie you see. But I brought John Landis in to direct it. I did that. I loved John Landis. I'd seen Kentucky Fried Movie. I hadn't seen it because it wasn't finished yet, but I'd seen pieces of it in an editing room, and I thought it was terrific. And I thought he was exactly the right guy. However, my boss at the studio, Ned, had another director in mind. I won't use his name because he's still around, but this other director had been directing television, and he'd been directing some of the Monkees television show, which I thought was culturally suicide.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, I just thought, what the hell? Who cares about the Monkees and who cares about this show? And directing bad television doesn't seem to be what we're looking for. So I called that guy, that director, and said, listen, Mr. Tannen wants me to send you a script. I've got to warn you, the script's not very good, and I'm embarrassed to send it to you, but I'm going to do it anyway. And if you wouldn't mind reading it over the next 2 weeks and just let us know whether it's something that's good enough for you or not. So in about a week and a half, he called me back and said, no, you're right. It's a piece of junk. It's stupid. I'm not going to do this. And I said, okay, well, let Mr. Tannen know. So then immediately I called Landis and said, there's a chance now that we can put this together. Remember, I wasn't running anything. I was just making this up on the fly, guys, because I didn't have a choice, you know. So Landis came in and supervised one rewrite and did a great job and tweaked the material and got it to stand up. The studio wanted very badly to have Chevy Chase play the Belushi role, which I was horrified. I thought this was the wrong guy and all this. I had a second in command named Sean Daniel, who was great, and I was kind of bringing Sean along because I knew I would need a head of production. If I were able to take over the movie side, I needed a second in command who was smart and on it, and Sean was. And so we worked together on this casting process. Bonnie Timmerman, Michael Chinich, those were casting people who made big contributions to this. You know, what can I say? Sean, then we tried to find a college or university that would let us shoot. Everybody said no. And listen, guys, my dad was a powerful political figure in North Carolina. I went to the UNC people. I went to the Duke people. I went to the Wake Forest people. I went to everybody in sight, and all of them said no. They all wanted to read the script. The minute they read the script, not a chance. Stay away from us. Don't get, all that. So we finally found a woman who was the newly minted chancellor of the University of Oregon in Eugene. She read it and said, I think this is really funny. Of course we'll do it. It's like, what? Amazing. So off to Eugene. I didn't go to the set. Sean did. Sean did a really good job of bringing the project to fruition. I should also add that just when I was ready to send everybody off to location, we were maybe 2-3 weeks away from shooting, the studio threw me another curve and Ned said, I'm not making this thing unless you find a star to be in it, even if it's in a small part, some name that people have heard of, because all these kids, nobody knows who any of these people are, and this is ridiculous. So I knew that every kid my age in America knew everything about Saturday Night Live. Mm-hmm. But people Ned's age didn't know anything. They didn't watch Saturday Night Live, and why would they? And, it would get in the way of their golf game or whatever the fuck. So I had worked for Jane Fonda as a reader. In doing that, I'd met Donald Sutherland. This is way before I got to Universal. So Donald Sutherland seemed like a very amiable, approachable guy. So I called his agent and I said, there's a tiny part in this movie, Animal House, and I need Donald to do this and blah, blah, blah. And send me the script. And she said, no, he'll never do it because it's too small and it's this and that. And just tell him that we met before working for Jane on this thing and I really need his help and you'll do me a humongous favor and I will owe you and blah, blah, blah. And he read the script and said, I think it's funny, but you've got to pay me something to do it. We figured out that we could afford to pay him $50,000 for 3 days work, as I remember. And so we did, and he did. And he got, honestly, Donald Sutherland got that picture a go ahead.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So, well,
so this is more than you ever wanted to know about all this.
No, not at all.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, sir.
Yes. Well, speaking of Belushi, I want to ask about Blues Brothers because at the time it wasn't like now where SNL characters just kept going to the big screen. So how did that movie come about? Because there's so many stories on that too. Like one of the famously, like that Aykroyd avoided not like a cocaine budget into it. So what are some of your experiences of that movie?
Well, so Danny had an idea for a movie, Danny Aykroyd, and he pitched it to us. It was really simple. Some guys get out of prison in Joliet. They have to rescue the Catholic orphanage where they were raised, which is about to be torn down and turned into a parking lot or something to that effect. So they've got to pull the old band back together, all of whom have spread out. While they've been in prison, the band's dissipated, gone their separate ways. They've got to convince everybody to get back together, and they've got to do a massive concert that makes enough money to rescue the orphanage. Worst idea in history, except if it's done properly, it's great. You know, I mean, it's a movie that's been made 100 times in the silent era. You know, it's very much the basics of filmmaking. So I said to Danny, write the script. He said, well, I need some things to write the script. I said, okay, what do you need? He said, well, I need you to buy a retired California Highway Patrol car and give it to me. Okay. So I need some money. Okay. And I'll need about 3 months. Said, okay. And Danny took this black and white with the California Highway Patrol logo painted over this car and set out across America and brought back a screenplay that was too long by an easy 100 pages. It was just gigantic. It wasn't a screenplay, it was like a telephone directory. It was insane. So that then became what we worked on to try to bring it down. But we had John Landis coming back after Animal House. And they loved Landis, and that made sense. And so we also had on the lot an amphitheater where musicians played. And by that time, I had inherited the amphitheater as one of the things I had responsibility for. Wasserman always gave you 6 jobs. You know, you never had one job. You always had multiple jobs. And so we booked the Blues Brothers in the amphitheater. And they sold the joint out every time they showed up, and people went crazy, and it was terrific. And that helped me sell the idea of this picture to the rest of the executives on the lot, you know, because they may not have ever seen the Blues Brothers or even heard anything, but they know that we sold out the amphitheater instantly. So that meant something to them. We put the movie together, and once more, Sean was designated to go suffer through the process on the thing because I'm doing all the other stuff. And my feeling about running a movie studio's motion picture division was really simple. My job was to take the most difficult films. My job was to take the films that could kill someone's career. I'm harder to kill than Sean or Helena or Marianne or the rest of the executives there. They could get wiped out by making a movie that doesn't perform, especially a movie if it goes over budget or if it raises unhappiness, you know. And for me, if a picture is going to be really difficult, I'm happy to take it. Because what are they going to do? Shoot me? And truthfully, guys, I felt so lucky to be there. I felt so lucky to have this job. I felt so lucky to be able to go to a studio lot every day and go in an office and say, yes, let's make this, and no, we're not going to make that. Come on. I mean, what more does a boy want in life? You have the biggest toy in the world. You have 400-acre movie studio with thousands of employees, and they'll do almost anything you ask.
Is there any other film that you had that you know, perhaps you went in and just had it recut and wasn't what would be the director's cut?
The most difficult recutting experience I ever had was The Deer Hunter.
Oh God, I thought you were going to say Heaven's Gate.
No, well, that's because I'm thinking about Michael Cimino. I think of the film that he followed Deer Hunter with.
Right.
Deer Hunter, we won 6 Academy Awards. We were nominated for 9 awards. We won 6 of them. That picture was enormously successful. That being said, when Michael Cimino delivered the picture to the studio, the director's cut was at least an hour plus minutes too long. It was insanely long. And I don't know if you remember the picture at all, but there's an Orthodox wedding sequence early in the picture. It was twice as long in his cut as it is in this cut, and it's still too long. So,
and as it was, you know, it even cut down. I mean, it was in that style where scenes were allowed to breathe. You know, it wasn't a quick, fast-paced.
That's right. And Cimino took advantage of that and pushed it as far as he could possibly push it, but pushed it way too far. If we had released his cut, it would have been a flop.
Right.
It was death. You know, I would never have sat through it in a theater. I'd gotten to a little over the halfway point, and I'd go, life's too short. I'm out of here. Goodbye. He was a very difficult, complicated guy and very difficult to deal with. Yikes. And so we took the picture away from him. I took the picture away from him, and I did it after we did back-to-back previews. One preview in a city of his choice with his cut, and one preview of a city of my choice with our cut. Our cut was 48 minutes shorter than his cut. 48 minutes, guys. And it was still long. Still a long picture.
Yeah.
So we went first to suburban Detroit, and an upscale area of Detroit, and showed the picture in his version. And there were about just 380 seats in that theater. And when the lights came up after, we had about 65 people left in the theater.
And the rest are still watching the film.
That's right. The rest are still watching. And a couple of those people are still institutionalized from having to watch something that long. So, including me. And so the next night we were in Chicago at the Little Carnegie on Rush Street, and 48 minutes shorter. I'd invited a couple of film critics that lived in the Chicago area that I knew, and one of them came running up to me in the lobby after the picture was over and threw his arms around me and said, "Congratulations, multiple Academy Awards." He was right. I didn't know he was right, but he was right. And so after the first, and I will just to make life more insane, Wasserman came. Wasserman never came to previews out in the field, but we'd spent a lot of money on this picture, and it had been a lot of trouble in the production, and it was a lot of trouble, and I mean, every Deer Hunter was trouble personified.
Wow.
However, we had it under control, I thought, and Wasserman came to Cimino's version in Detroit. After it was over, he didn't say a thing. He didn't talk to me. He walked right by me, went out of the building, into his car, went to his hotel to check out, got stuck in the elevator in his hotel for an hour while they tried to fix the elevator and get him out of there, then got in his car, got in a plane, went back to LA. I went on to Chicago. When I got back, I went in his office and said, "Let me tell you about Chicago." He said, "Don't mention that picture to me." I said, "Okay. I'm not going to tell you anything, but I am going to tell you that it's not just releasable. We're going to get nominated, and people are going to take this picture seriously. It's very, very good." And they did. And it was a hit. And it got Michael Cimino the job making Heaven's Gate at UA. And Heaven's Gate single-handedly torpedoed the production company, killed United Artists off, gone, dead. Dead as a doorknob, kind of, you know.
But you
And
recognized what needed to be done, and you weren't in
yeah,
there actually, holding the film up to the light and cutting. But you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
yeah. It turned out. Congratulations, many decades later, it was
Right.
fantastic. It was so powerful. I mean, the
that's
film.
a good
Really was.
film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good film. But it's also I learned a lot on that film, and one of the things I learned is that the responsibility of filmmaking has to be taken seriously in terms of the broad cultural mandate. We have a sequence in that film in which Russian roulette is played, and some guys die playing Russian roulette. A very powerful sequence. Uh, 6 teenage boys in the U.S.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
inspired by that movie played Russian roulette and lost.
Oh my gosh.
And all 6 sets of parents decided to sue Universal because we caused their son's suicide. So I called all 6 families and talked to them and invited them separately to come to Universal at our expense and to talk to me about what we were doing and how we made the film, what the decisions were,
Hmm.
and all of that. And so for some months, I went through a series of meetings
Wow.
with heartbroken parents whose teenage boys had played Russian roulette. Now, when you drill down on that, a lot of them were drinking. A lot of them did this Russian roulette thing as a joke. A lot of them were behaving pretty much like I behaved, and perhaps you guys did too as teenagers. I don't know. I
Sure.
wasn't always making the smartest decisions in the world, you know?
Of course, this is tragic and unthinkable. I'm a parent, but
Yeah,
but also, I hope they came to understand that Chaplin fans weren't hanging from a clock on the side of a building. I mean, it's a
right,
movie.
right, right.
Yeah,
Well, that's right. And we didn't we didn't cause their children to do anything that their children might not have done in some other format,
yeah,
in some other context. In other words, the kids went to see Bullet, but they didn't crash cars at 100
Right.
miles an hour in the
right,
streets.
right, right.
Their kids didn't act out on everything they saw in movies. And so among the hundreds of thousands of people who saw that film in the US, because it was a big hit, some of those kids were not responsible or thoughtful or had their heads screwed on properly about how to digest that information, how to perceive it as fiction,
Yeah.
and how to handle it.
The
And
the Russian roulette bit or scene was so damn tense, but I don't remember it being glorified. It
no,
wasn't.
no, it
Yeah,
wasn't glorified.
yeah,
No, it was
Hmm.
tense. They were trapped by the Viet Cong and being
mhm,
Right.
held prisoner and
yeah,
forced to play Russian roulette, and
yeah,
it was not it
yeah,
was not good, but it was also very, very important to the film,
Right.
yeah,
in terms of the drama of it.
yeah.
Well, shifting gears, which is,
Yeah,
I wanted to ask about a couple of Spielberg movies. Before one's the monster hit, which we'll get to in a second. But before we get to that one, I have to talk about 1941. We've discussed that on this show here. I love that film,
yeah.
and it's always described as a bomb, which it wasn't. It made money. And so, what were your experiences on that movie?
Well, first of all, that was a movie that Spielberg did almost entirely without involvement by the studio.
Really?
The studio had been very involved, obviously, in Jaws, and everything about Jaws was sort of universal. And Spielberg was very smart about how to push the studio around and how to manipulate people. I was not there when they made
Right.
Jaws, you know, and what I was there for was the release of Jaws, and that was its own brainstorm. And I don't know who had that brainstorm. Let's assume it was either Lou Wasserman, Sid Sheinberg, or Ned Tannen, the 3 guys at the top of the company in one way or another. But nobody had done television advertising for a film in that way at that scale until Jaws. And afterwards, everybody did television advertising all the time for every movie, even if it didn't deserve it. And so that was important. So Spielberg had carte blanche to do what he wanted on 1941, and he did. And I like the film, but I didn't love the film. I thought it was going to be hard to sell. It was hard to sell. I thought the title was wrong. But that's nobody's done. Spielberg's title's wrong. Yeah, right. Go sit down in the corner and be quiet. We'll call you when your number comes up, you know. So, yeah. However, E.T. was a very different animal.
But was there trepidation about making? I know Raiders came between them, but was there trepidation about him making an alien movie? After
I'll tell you what there was. First of all, Melissa Matheson, who wrote E.T., was a friend of mine and a close friend, a good friend. And she had written, of course, Raiders, and she'd written other things, Black Stallion, and she was a terrific screenwriter, just terrific. And she was married to Harrison Ford,
right?
At the time. And I was talking to her about, as she was developing E.T., I've talked to her a lot. And she said, well, I think people are really going to like this movie. And I said, great, and tell me more. And she would go through scenes and do stuff. She said, I'll tell you someday my inspiration for the movie, and I'm not going to tell you now. I said, okay, love to hear that sometime. She turns the script in. I thought it was terrific. I thought it was great. I basically said, I have no comments on this script. You know, go make the movie, guys. Do whatever you're thinking. And Spielberg's pulling his unit together. And then I get from Sid Sheinberg a conversation that goes like this. We're not going to make this movie because it's a children's film. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, you know, the only people that want to see this are people too young to buy tickets. So no one's going to go see it. It's not, and it's expensive to make. And they had done a budget on the lot. And I said, well, how about this? How about we're able to take millions of dollars out of the budget? He said, well, if it was cheap enough, if we could do it like graffiti or something. Now, listen, guys, graffiti costs less than $1 million to make.
Yeah.
So we couldn't do that. But we could take it off the lot and take it to a non-union lot, which I did, and to Culver City, to the old Culver City Studios, which had been in history Cathay Studios and had been David Selznick Studios, Selznick International, and was a great independent lot for doing things inexpensively if you just didn't have the money to shoot at a heavily unionized studio. Also, we had a unique relationship to unions. Mr. Wasserman had settled and negotiated virtually every union contract for a period of 30 or 40 years. Every time a union threatened to strike, Wasserman would negotiate a settlement before there was a strike. He kept the rowdy maniacs of Hollywood, he kept them calm, and he kept them in the groove, and he made sure the business was orderly and directed and not going to blow up for anybody. So I knew the Teamsters would support whatever we decided to do, even if we were costing Teamster jobs, you know, and they would. Also, Mr. Wasserman had a personal attorney named Sidney Korshak, who was also represented the Central Teamsters Pension Fund, among other things, and was allegedly heavily involved in the mob, although I never saw any evidence of that. All I knew was Sidney was a very effective lawyer. And so we moved it to Culver City, and we saved millions of dollars. We got the budget down, and we made the picture there, and Stephen did a brilliant job, I thought, and all of it, all the things, all the choices they made were good choices. And we hadn't had a preview of the picture. So we decided we'd preview it in Dallas at what mall? At a mall called North Point, I think. North Point, maybe. Anyway, so we all went to Dallas. Scheinberg, everybody. Wasserman did not go, of course, because he almost never went to a preview. And the movie ran, and the audience stood and applauded. Now, guys, audiences don't stand and applaud movies very often in your life. And Scheinberg came running out of the theater and embraced Spielberg and said, "I'm so glad we made it possible for you to make this movie. This is going to be the biggest hit of your life." He was right. You know? And all I can say is at the same time he was doing that, I was negotiating for another Raiders type movie that Spielberg wanted to do that had Harrison attached, and Scheinberg turned me down in that negotiation, killed that negotiation that night after seeing E.T. I could never quite figure out. Well, I know what his rationale was. His rationale was the picture had to make $100 million domestic to break even, which in those days, making $100 million domestic was a big watermark. But it seemed to me rational that if we're going to risk, I mean, that's our job, is to put a bet on the table, you know, lose some money or make some money, you know. And so we didn't make that film. In any event. So it doesn't matter.
What film was that? Which one?
Didn't get made. It didn't get made. Nobody was willing to stand up. And and by the way, there are plenty of movies we passed on that we should have made. I mean, I'm the guy who turned down Officer and a Gentleman. You know, I mean, so you know, I understand what it is to let a movie go because you just don't feel it or see it or get it, and it turns out to be a giant hit for somebody else.
We're going to ask about that in a second, but I wanted, before we get to that, I do want to ask about Back to the Future, because it's one of my top 2 favorite films of all time.
It's a great film.
Yeah, it's considered an all-time classic now. But at the time, like what you just said about you, many other studios had turned it down.
Yes.
Right, and there was this whole thing with the family ties, not wanting to let Michael J. Fox do the movie, and Eric Stoltz being replaced. So how did you first get involved with it after all these other studios turned it down? And what do you think about the making of it?
So I liked very much Zemeckis and Gale. I had worked with them to develop a movie that we didn't make called Used Cars.
Right.
And which preceded Back to the Future. But I'd loved the script. I wanted to make that movie so badly, and we could not get a budget that I could get past Wasserman. I just couldn't get it. It drove me crazy. It's one of those movies I really wanted to make and never got a chance to. So we didn't make it. I think Columbia ended up making it, as I remember. I'm not sure. You know, obviously, in the House of Rosen, I defer to you about all detailed information.
Yeah.
And so I liked working with those guys. I had faith in them. I thought they could pull it off. And I read what there was to read of Back to the Future, and I thought it was stunningly good. And then Spielberg decided he would champion it. And that turned the tide, because by that time, you know, E.T. had happened. It was the first $1 billion box office film. And once they had Spielberg steering the boat, supposedly, I don't know how involved Steven really was. I never talked to him about it, but it didn't matter at that point. This picture was going to get made.
I always wondered why. I mean, Zemeckis is obviously talented. I just always wondered why Spielberg didn't do Back to the Future.
Yeah, I don't know why he didn't, but I know that he whatever he did, he really went to bat for those guys, and he went to bat for the film internal to Universal. And remember, by that time, we were the Spielberg factory. We had Jurassic on the being written. We had stuff coming up that was, it was all headed that direction. And we'd already built the Taco Bell, as we called it, the building for Spielberg in the mid lot that did look a lot like a Taco Bell. And so I thought that was a good thing. I mean, listen, studios that find a director that they can hang on to. I mean, it didn't hurt Paramount to have Cecil B. DeMille direct a whole lot of goddamn pictures in the beginning of that company.
Yep.
And on and on and on. Whoever owned Charlie Chaplin, that was valuable. And it was same thing is true of Spielberg. And he's a wonderful filmmaker and a very good guy and a very responsible guy. He did a very good job of remaining calm when people were trying to knock off E.T. There was real pushback on E.T., not just Sheinberg, but other senior older executives.
Those are the older executives who were at Lakeside trying to hit a golf ball while the rest of you were reshaping Hollywood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Tom, let me ask you this. So you already mentioned that first of all, your track record is phenomenal. But no, who's going to hit 1,000? You talked about how you passed on Officer and a Gentleman. Okay. Did I read that you passed on Ghostbusters?
No, I didn't pass on Ghostbusters.
Okay. No.
I wish I had Ghostbusters.
Okay.
I would not have passed on it. But I did not pass on Ghostbusters. On the other hand, without naming this executive, one of our very senior executives passed on a little picture that Lucas was trying desperately to get made called Star Wars. So,
I've heard of it. Yeah.
And by the way, I'm also the same idiot who said yes to Xanadu.
But you got Olivia Newton-John and ELO. Come on.
And I've got to say, Olivia saved my ass on that movie. She really did. We lost every dime on the picture, and we made in profits a little over $20 million just on the soundtrack.
Because she was such a talented
Because she was so good. Jimmy Iovine produced it. She fucking did a great job. It was, star-crossed.
Mm-hmm. Xanadu has gone on to become this huge cult hit now, though, too.
I know. It's a mystery to me. It's like, how on earth did that become a cult hit? I have no idea.
Well, one of the things, while you were at Universal, you also created a unit for helping break in new writers and directors and actors. So among them was John Hughes, the Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles. So
yep.
What are your memories of Hughes? What, on those films?
Well, I like John very much. And I remember I'd been working with the guys from Lampoon. So and they all had great respect for Hughes, and they all knew each other. And John was a terrific writer. And actually, what happened those three pictures, which we made basically back to back, those three pictures were all developed at A&M Records by a fellow who was running their movie division. They didn't really have a movie division, but they were trying to make some movies at A&M. And so they hired John Hughes, and he developed those three scripts, and then they went out of the movie business. And so Ned Tannen, who had been my boss for a while at Universal, had left the studio, and we'd made an overall producing deal with Ned. And so he was looking around for something to make. And he read these three scripts and called and said, "We're buying all three of these scripts. These are great movies." And I'm a huge fan of teen movies. One of my favorite movies at Universal to work on and make was Fast Times at Ridgemont High. What can I say? I loved Cameron Crowe. I loved his writing. I thought he was gifted, and I thought Amy Heckerling did a great job. I loved her little short at the AFI called Getting It Over With, which is why I hired her. And Tannen was right down my alley, funny, interesting teen movies. Let's try it. They're about something people can relate. I could relate. I was you grew up in a small-ish town in the South, and there are not a lot of movies that actually speak to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a common, easy occurrence. And, you know, so when you find something that speaks, and when I saw Rebel Without a Cause, I thought, fuck, this is genius filmmaking.
Fast Times. Like that film was a solid movie, but
Oh,
through and through. I just thought, and the performances obviously made Sean Penn, put him on the map. Amy Hecker Lane. It was just a good movie.
it is a good movie.
Yeah.
They did a great, everybody did a great job. And Cameron did a great job of adapting his book. So we had a music executive who I had helped take over the amphitheater, a guy named Danny Bramson. Danny said, "You got to read some work by my friend Crow." And I said, "Who is your friend Crow?" He said, "Well, he's working for the San Diego Door, an alternative newspaper, and he's gotten some stuff published by Rolling Stone. And he's like the smartest guy about music I've ever met." So I met Cameron Crowe. He said, "Well, I'm working on a book." He told me about the book, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It didn't have a title yet. I said, "Great, we'll buy it. We'll option it." So I called he had an agent, David Obst, and I made a deal with David. And now this was a Universal movie, soon to be a Universal movie. And Cameron wrote a great adaptation. Cameron's just talented, just hugely, hugely talented. And so here's what I liked about that movie. I liked that it was funny. I liked that it was smart. I liked that Marilyn Vance did great costumes, particularly costumes for people who work in fast food places, who always have to wear these ridiculous, try a Long John Silver costume that you have to wear while you're serving fish sandwiches to people. I mean, and at that moment in our history, a lot of things were happening in relationship between parents and teenagers. A lot of parents were charging their teenage sons and daughters a rent for their room in their house. That was happening in a lot of places. And the thing I love about that movie is we could never make that movie today.
Right.
We could never make a movie in which a teenage girl gets pregnant, decides to have an abortion, doesn't talk to her parents, tells her brother what's going on, goes to some version of Planned Parenthood, gets an abortion. Her brother helps her keep the secret, and it's never thought of again. It's just life. It just moves on, just like life as a teenager.
Yeah.
And we could never do many of the things we did in that movie. We took a lot of interesting chances. Yeah. Sometimes we got nailed. We had male frontal nudity in that movie originally, and couldn't sell that to the rating board. Got an X rating.
Was it Judge Reinhold when he comes into the bathroom or whatever and catches? Okay.
Yeah. So we got an X rating, and then I had to climb out from under the X rating, and Amy and everybody hated having to make compromises for the rating board. I did too, but I can't get the distributors to book the movie if it's X. So, we can show it to 8 people or we can show it to 8 million people. I take your choice. Yeah. So we cut just enough of that to be able to get away with it. And then Phoebe Cates, and Phoebe Cates going to be at least partially naked in the movie. And then I realized I know her dad and I know her uncle. And her uncle produces all the Academy Awards for the thing. These are Hollywood family. So I called her dad and said, "Listen, your daughter wants to do this part. It's a really cool movie. I love it. I think the script is great, blah, blah. But she's going to be at least partially naked in this movie. And I need to know that it's okay with you. You're not going to..." What I really was saying, but I didn't say this. I said, "I don't need you calling Wasserman and saying that we've led your daughter astray," because she was 18, but just barely. And, and he laughed and he said, "Tom, she has been making up her own mind about what she does for the last 5 years. So if she wants to do it," I said, "God bless her." And So we avoided that potential nightmare.
Yeah.
And it was, I liked the movie. I thought it had integrity. I thought it spoke to a lot of the reality of what growing up as a teenager in America at that moment in history felt like and looked like.
It really did. It represented so many of us,
Yeah, I
yeah,
know.
yeah. Brian Backer, who was the actor who
Yeah.
fell in love with Jennifer Jason Leigh. I mean, I know who he represented, and I know who she did, and he did, and it really just
Oh,
spoke.
I know.
It spoke. I love Cameron Crowe. I was a fan. I worked with Cameron Crowe before that. He was an actor in something I was in, and I
Hmm.
thought nothing of him except for what a nice guy. And then, Almost Famous is one of my favorite films. I just thought,
Yeah, it's a great film.
he's such an, I can't say underrated because he's been very successful, but yeah, good eye.
Well, underrated in a funny way because Cameron makes really culturally astute films.
Hmm.
He's never made a film that wasn't culturally revealing and smart and authentic,
Hmm.
and authenticity is rare in Hollywood, man. It's,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a hard thing to find and it's a hard thing to protect.
But it's also one of those things you can't deny.
Yeah, that's
You,
right.
you know what I mean? Whether
Yeah.
it does box office, has box office success or not, is separate from how it's received by people. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? The rest of us were just, ticket buyers.
Yeah.
And if it's authentic, it spoke to us. And we're out of we're out of the business part of it. And that's why, these films like Fast Times, I could watch it again today. It just
It's actually
speaks.
better. I watched it about a year ago,
Oh yeah,
and it's better than I remember it being.
that's a
That's a
solid film.
shock, Whoa.
Right. Okay. So you left Universal Pictures,
Yeah.
and then you went to go. You went on your own to make
Yes.
films, your own production. Was that
That's
frightening at the time, and what prompted that?
well, two things prompted it. One, I internal to the company,
Hmm.
Mr. Wasserman made a decision that we were going to buy RCA.
Hmm.
The reason we were buying RCA is that RCA owned NBC, and we wanted to own NBC.
Hmm.
But to get it, we had to buy RCA, and then we could divest pieces of RCA and keep NBC,
Hmm.
and it would have been Universal NBC instead of NBC Universal, And so to do that, the people helping us buy it by putting up money, venture capital groups, decided I was too young to be running the movie division. Well, they were right on some level. I certainly was young and all that. And yet they wanted somebody older with more credentials. So Frank Price had been running Columbia Pictures. And he'd done okay, but he had a secret weapon, and that weapon was called Ray Stark. Ray Stark controlled Columbia Pictures, even though he had no formal title there. He was the most successful producer in Columbia's history, and he controlled tons of Columbia stock, and he made Columbia look very, very good. In any event, so Lou said, we're having a hard time closing Frank Price's deal. So I said, okay, what's the problem? And he described what deal we wanted to close. And I said, here's the problem. We're just not offering the guy enough cash. I mean, this is all I understand. You don't want to pay somebody this amount of money. I won't mention it because a lot of people are still alive in this equation. But, I just say there was a threshold that they had decided, and it was just that you were not going to get the guy unless you exceeded this threshold because he was being wildly overpaid at Columbia by Ray. And Columbia would do anything Ray wanted, and that's the way that worked out. So I said to Mr. Wasserman, if you succeed in hiring Frank Price, the first thing Frank's going to do is fire me. And he said, well, maybe, maybe not. And I said, well, that's exactly right. Maybe, maybe not. But it's more like maybe than maybe not. So he said, here's the deal I'll make with you. talk to Frank, see what you can do, tell him how wonderful it is here, whatever you have to do. If for some reason he fires you, the first thing you do is call me and just come see me. I said, okay, fine. You know, running a movie studio, as you know, the average number of years you get to run a movie studio is about 3.5. You take all the people that have run studios over time and you digest it, people last 3.5, sometimes 4 years. Once in a while, you have a Sherry Lansing who lasts 8 years, but it's rare. I had lasted 9 years running a studio. I knew my sell-by date was already over. I just didn't know when or how. But once we had a corporate problem that was more important than movies, then I thought, okay, so this is what we'll do. We'll get Frank Price and he'll fire me and we'll see what Lou has to say. So that's what we did. Frank had been there 3 days. He called me on the phone. Your services are no longer needed by the company.
Wow.
Thank you. Okay. So that's all right. I'd been fired 4 times, by the way, by Ned in the early days when I was just starting out. Every time Ned got mad at me, he'd fire me. And every time he'd fire me, I'd go back to my office and go back to work. So, you know, I don't know. Anyway, I went to see Mr. Wasserman. He said, how much vested stock do you have in the company? I told him. He said, give me just a minute. He picked up the phone. He called the guy in charge of the stock program for employees. And he said, here's a number. And he gave him a number that was 3 times larger than the amount of stock I had accrued in the company.
Oh,
But that was to me, that was a big, serious number. You know, it was not $100 million, but it wasn't 10. You know, it was a substantial amount of money. And he said, take this and go out there and make a bunch of good movies. You've been wonderful and thank you. So I thought, all right, this is how he expresses his thanks, and I appreciate it. It allowed me to start the Mount Company. It allowed me to make 27 movies, guys. I made 27 movies as an independent producer in a world where the life of an independent producer is frequently perilous.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah. Wow.
Still amazing to me that this business, that all the successes that you had, and you're like, okay, thanks, see ya. That's
Oh, but it's
right.
here's the thing, you know, it's not for the faint of heart, this movie thing.
Mhm.
It just isn't. And you can't assume ever that you're going to survive more than maybe that day, maybe not even that day. And then the more you talk to people around the business and people who've been around it and survived it for long periods of time, the more you realize that this is not even really about the hits. This is more about the corporate necessities of making something, the machine of the factory, of the film factory, making that machine work, protecting that machine is more important than anything.
Sure.
It's more important than E.T. It's more important than any one picture or group of pictures. And that's why, and this, by the way, guys, this qualifies now as a clever segue. This is this clever segue department.
Okay.
So that's why I wrote Rafferty Returns, this book that has just come out. Because this book is about a guy who has had some unhappy business adventures in Hollywood, a guy who was a PR guy and built a big company and then lost it, got divorced, in a mess, broke, and his best friend, who was a CIA agent, becomes the president of a movie studio and hires him. And his job is director of special projects. And that job is the studio fixer. That's the guy who, when anything goes wrong or is about to go wrong, or threatens the studio or threatens the head of the studio, it's taken care of. Now at Universal, I had two fixers working for me full time. One guy, that's a name I won't use right now because he's still with us. One guy was the bag man, he was in charge of the cash. And when I needed the Mexican army to give me 1,000 extras and 6 tanks to make a movie, somehow the general in charge who could say yes to that would have a large amount of money show up in his Panamanian bank account. Things happen. What can you do? And sometimes you just need 1,000 soldiers.
Yeah.
Wow. So then we had another guy who was the political fixer. He was very close to the mayor, the city council, the county commissioners, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and appropriate people in DC when we decided to build a 4-lane bridge over the Hollywood freeway so that people could get in and out of the Universal tour more easily. As you could imagine, there are a lot of people who claim jurisdiction over that freeway.
Yeah.
Federal government says it's part of the interstate highway system. The state of California says it's a state highway and it's necessary for emergency ingress and egress. People don't want you to just build a bridge, even though we're paying for it. And so that particular fellow worked his little ears off and made it possible to line up all of the politicians in a row who said, Universal, you need a bridge over a freeway, you're going to pay for it, we love you, just put it up. And we did. And so
I live in the hills close to that. And I just want to tell you, thank you so much. When that thing was built, I'm like, oh my goodness, there is a God.
Yeah, well, yeah. I know. It's, it also, by the way, it turned the In-N-Out burger on that corner into the most successful one in the valley because everybody who comes in or out stops there to get something to eat.
Yeah,
it's very
packed.
Funny. Yeah. Anyway, so that was the idea behind the book, Rafferty Returns, and I'm very pleased that it's gotten some decent reviews from various other maniacs. It also, of course, just like the movie business, it will get good reviews and it will get bad reviews. By the way, Smokey and the Bandit got 130 reviews in the US. It got one good review. One good review. Wow. It got killed by everybody. And Tom Shales, who was then the film critic for the Washington Post, wrote about this and said, if you think this is a stupid redneck wreck the car movie, you're not paying attention. And then he wrote very eloquently about Smokey and the Bandit and what it meant and how it worked and why it worked. And I appreciated that very, very much because I was desperate for any review that I could use in the advertising,
Yeah, it was such a good film, and no disrespect to Mr. Howard, but it was, it wasn't another Eat My Dust or anything like that.
Oh no, that's right.
Yeah, it was a fine film. Okay, I'm going to go, since we're talking about the book, I'm just going to go out of order, before we bring it home. Yes. Did I read that? Are there talks about making a film?
There are talks. Much to my amazement, some people at Amazon Prime seem to have some interest in this, and we'll see how that works. It would not be a film, it would be streaming media, probably 10 parts or something like that. And that's fine. That's where we are in the world.
Yeah.
We haven't gone anywhere else. That was the only place we went. And we'll see. And it's too early to know about any of that. And I would, of course, hope that it would become some kind of image capture based media. But, we just have to see.
Yeah. Gosh, I would watch that. I would sit down and watch every moment. And you could put so much more into, if, I know this is where we are in the world, and there's so many more hours, such a long running time.
I know.
8 parts,
It's wonderful. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
So I got to ask you this. We're talking about your book and your career. It had been said or speculated that Robert Altman's The Player was Tim Robbins' character was loosely based on you or your life, and you have publicly said no. In fact, specifically, I think you said no. I have never killed a screenwriter, which is just so fantastic, such a great answer because it implies that perhaps all the rest is true. But uh,
No.
so what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know the writer of the uh, book and of the screenplay, and I
Mhm.
think he's a huge talent, Michael Tolkien. And we both went to Bard. He did some work at Universal. We knew each other during that time that I was kind of moving up and turning into a guy who ran a studio. Um, and I have no idea if any of that is loosely based on me.
Mhm.
I would say that there are plenty of other executives it could have been based on.
Mhm.
I had a friend, David Field, who was a young executive on the way up at another company, and I always thought he would be a good candidate for this, and
Yeah.
some others, you know.
Yeah.
But somehow, somewhere, I don't know how it started, but somehow, somewhere, the press got a hold of the idea that it was loosely based on me. So I get asked that question everywhere I fucking go,
Yeah.
and
Sorry.
that's
Sorry.
all right.
Okay, so let me just real quick. Lastly, so Bull Durham,
Yes,
one of the best baseball films made of all time. Before we just talk a little bit about the film. In real life, is it true? Are you part owner of the Durham Bulls?
I was at the time we made the movie. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Well,
I was one of
Cool.
three owners. There were three of us. We started. I always liked minor league baseball. I was never a fan of Major League Baseball, but I
hmm,
grew up in Durham and I grew up watching the Durham ball team, which at that time was a Houston Astros farm club. Terrible fucking farm
Uh-huh.
club. Oh God, God Almighty. And I would go, my dad and I would go and we'd watch, we'd have a hot dog and watch and I liked the idea that in a minor league game you could watch young men making their way to the future and
Mhm.
watch older players desperately trying to hang on to a job all at the same time,
Right.
all on the same team. So we started, Miles Wolf, Van Schley, and I, three of us formed a company, Texas Baseball Holding. We bought the Texas City Stars in Texas City, Texas. That's the old C League. God, worst team in the world in the worst ballpark in America. And and I mean, guys, they wouldn't even serve beer. You know, what's that about? You know, how
It's
do you
baseball.
it's baseball for God's sake.
Yeah.
And the ballpark was falling apart, old wooden ballpark and, decrepit. Anyway, we rebuilt the team and we rebuilt the stadium and we got the city council to agree to serve beer. And after a few years, we sold that team and we bought more. And we ended up with about 12 teams, among them the Durham Bulls. And the Durham Bulls obviously were close to my heart because I'd grown up there. And they weren't called the Bulls in those days, they were just called various names. And we made a decision. This is like more inside baseball than you want to know, but we made a decision that we would not sign player development contracts with the majors. So as a result, all of our teams were independent. That meant we got to hire and fire the managers of the team. When you sign a PDC, you
ah,
give up the right to control the manager. If you don't have control of the manager and things are going badly, what the hell do? You
Right. Right.
call the big guys and say, "Hey, Mr. Big Guy, I need help down here. Little old me is dying." But this way, you can go to the manager and say, "Look, buddy, we either fix this or you're out of here."
Yeah.
And that's that. And it's also true that the minute you sign a PDC, if any of your players show real talent, you wake up and you have a catfish hunter on your roster,
Mm.
and suddenly they pull them up to the show because they want them.
Yeah.
sure.
But
Yeah.
that's the reason you sell tickets. You sell tickets because old catfish is out there
Yeah.
and people go to see him. And so you can't be in that spot. I mean, I'm used to the movie business. I want people in seats. I need people in seats. So it doesn't seem logical to me that I would give that power to some other force. So we never did a PDC deal, and we ended up owning the Amarillo Gold Sox and the Utica Blue Sox and the Asheville Tourists and I mean, on and on and on. Anyway,
Yeah,
so
I mean, minor league baseball, like, I'm a
Fun.
huge baseball fan, and so is Jonathan, but it, as cool as minor league baseball is, for me, my experience, I used to go watch I've seen the Modesto A's and whatever,
oh yeah,
but watching a really bad minor league baseball team is just as depressing to me as it is uh, cool. It's like it's a field of broken dreams,
yes,
basically, to me,
that's
and it
right.
just, yeah,
That's
it's like,
right.
yeah,
No, you're right. It's heartbreak. It is
yeah.
heartbreaking, but it's also,
They
so we were talking earlier about the need for authenticity in a movie.
Hmm.
but
You know, the reason Bull Durham works is that it's a great romance. The romance is believable. The romance is authentic. You want Annie Savoy and Crash Davis
Hmm.
to be
but
together at the end of that movie.
Sure do.
You really do. And the fact that she's sleeping with two guys trying to make up her mind, I mean, hey, that happens in real life, you know?
Yep. Yep.
I mean, it's just, I once had a Warner Brothers executive tell me that they weren't going to give me a go ahead on Tequila Sunrise because she sleeps with both guys at the same time. What? What? You know,
That's
how
wild.
horrors, you know,
Yeah.
how terrible.
the studio give you trouble. I had read that the studio did not want either Tim Robbins or Costner.
Yeah. Well, nobody
Oh,
wanted Costner. So let's back up. I had wanted Costner. I'd done a television movie based on a wonderful book called Son of the Morning Star about Custer, and I'd wanted Costner very much for the lead in that, and I couldn't get him. The network wouldn't approve him, and but I was a fan of Costner's from an early moment. And then Ron Shelton, who wrote and directed the picture, by the way, did a fabulous job. Ron, however, is a former ball player. You know, he's in the International League. He played for Rochester. He got drummed out of that business and he decided to go to Hollywood and write screenplays. Who knew? And he's done a very, very admirable job of that. He's a wonderful screenwriter and a wonderful director. He wasn't sure about Costner. And there was another actor he liked. And I was not going to do the other actor. So we had to solve that issue. We solved it. And then he had an idea about someone to play the Annie Savoy role, but a woman who's the agent for Susan Sarandon called me and said, Susan's going to call you. She's in Italy, but she wants to talk to you about this Bull Durham thing. So she called. And she said, I love it. I am Annie Savoy. I know how to play it. And I said, well, here's the problem. The director's got his mindset on somebody else who I don't like, so I don't want to use him. I don't want to go there. And she said, well, will it help if I audition? And it's fucking Susan Sarandon. She's already been a movie star, you
Yeah.
know. And so I said, of course it would. She said, great, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. I'll be there in 48 hours and I'll come in and audition. What are you going to say except Mazel Tov? You know,
Yeah.
let's go.
Yeah.
So she gets on a plane. She shows up. She goes to the offices, which at that time were on the Warner lot. Had been part of Columbia. Columbia and Warner shared that lot for a few years. And we were under a Columbia contract, but on the Warner's lot. And what can I say? She was just genius. She was just Annie Savoy. There was no, it wasn't even debatable. And
Yeah,
then,
no kidding.
and then I called Orion, who were allegedly going to finance the movie. And the head of production at Orion, I'm not going to name names again because these guys are still around. Head of production at Orion said, you can't use Susan Sarandon because she's too old and she's not sexy. So I said, Susan, they think you're too old and not sexy. What do you want to do? And she said, well, what should I do? And I said, what you should do is you should go over and meet with this guy. I'll book a meeting for you. Go over and meet with him. Wear something that has a lot of cleavage and lean over his desk for half an hour, and he'll say yes. And she said, I've done it before. No problem. So she...
Oh, the movie business.
Us men are so simple and so predictable.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, she did that. Whatever she did, she charmed the hell out of the guy. And the next thing I know, I get a phone call from him saying, I've been thinking about Susan, and I think people just don't understand her. I said, well, yep, okay, good. And by the way, we were turned down everywhere, including Orion. And then they did a preview screening or two of No Way Out, which is a remake of an old picture called The Big Clock. Yeah. And suddenly they're in love with Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
After seeing the preview of No Way Out, they realize they've got a budding star on their hands, and they say yes. And we argue about money, and we end up making the picture just under $9 million. And then Ron wants to go find a location, and so I give him several ballparks that I knew well in the South. One in Charleston, one in some other place in South Carolina, and the Asheville Tourist Ballpark, etc. He goes on his tour, and he meets my partner Miles Wolf, who's running the Durham Bulls, on the ground there, and says, well, let's use the Durham Ballpark. And it's a good decision. I was prepared to shoot him if he didn't say yes, So we did. And then we got to make the picture in Durham, which was really fun for me. And
let's not forget Tim Robbins in that film. I mean, he was just
don't even close. So
goodness.
That's Bonnie Timmerman at work. Bonnie Timmerman's a stunning casting director. She's done about 15 or 20 movies for me over the years, and she's always been on target. And she said, there's this guy, Tim Robbins, I'd never heard of him. And he didn't know anything about baseball to speak of, and he couldn't really throw a ball or catch a ball or anything. And we had a grassy area in front of the offices on the Warner lot. And so he showed up one afternoon, and Ron went out and pitched baseball with him and said, well, the guy just is terrible at baseball, but I'm going to take him to the batting cage over here on Sepulveda and work with him for a while. And I tell you, he's so funny. He's perfect for the part. And I said, great, let's do it. As Tim Robbins is a ball player, as far as I'm concerned. And so we pulled all that together. So, the most fun I had in a weird way on that movie was we had the premiere of the movie in Durham in the old Carolina Theater, and where I'd seen my first movie as a child.
Growing up, sure. You're growing up. It's amazing for
growing.
You.
And my parents came. Everybody came. We filled the theater with a lot of people, and blah blah. And so I introduced the film, and I said, I just want to make one thing clear before you see this movie. There's some very rough language in this movie, and I want you all to know that I tried to take it out, but my mom wouldn't let me. She's in the audience, of course, and so she never forgave me for that. So there you go.
Oh man, well, hey Tom, I gotta say, this was what a fascinating conversation, and I Rafferty Returns. I can't wait to read. By the way, that's my next.
Well, I hope you guys enjoy it. I tried to make it interesting in ways that I thought people like you guys would appreciate. It's actually written for you guys, and
okay.
It really is. It's designed to be appreciated by people who are smart about the quixotic life of entertainment business.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it sounds fascinating. And before we go, before he signs us off, I'm just going to bust your chops for a second. The man can green light E.T. and Bull Durham, but he can't put some wireless headphones in his ears. Because I'm gonna tell you something. Whenever I wear the kind of earbuds you have on, I do the same thing. I notice my hand. I talk with my hands, knocks them out of my ears every time. So we're sending you a set of pop culture retro earbuds, the wireless. to your house.
Perfect. And that would be great and greatly appreciated. And not only do these drop out of my ears all the time, I have 2 sets of them on 2 different computers here on the desk, and both sets fall out of my ears all the time. So
yeah.
Well, again, Thom, thank you so much. By the way, I just went on record, by the way, I do love Porky, so I don't want to.
I'm sorry, man. It's all subjective. I wasn't.
No, it is subjective. And by the way, I'm not a Porky's fan either. And so I don't know. I just never clicked with that movie.
I just remember that Animal House at the time was sort of, people wanted to clump them together, but they weren't.
Yeah. Thom, again, thank you so much. It was so much. Like we could be here all day hearing your stories, but thank you for taking the time today.
Well, thank you guys very, very much. I'm sorry for being late to the event here. And to quote Dean Wormer from Animal House, no more fun of any kind. All right.
So
you got it.
We have to hear which movie that was later on. But all right, hold on 1 second. We'll just sign this out. Again, this has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen with Moosie Drier. And again, a very special thanks to Thom Mount. The book is Rafferty Returns. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you for tuning in to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast. Listening to this podcast just makes you really cool.